The coffee cup on Dr. Leonard Price's desk trembled first. It was a tiny thing, a soft ring against porcelain as the liquid rippled. The air conditioner had just kicked on that was all but Riley Monroe felt the vibration through the soles of her shoes. It climbed into her calves, her spine, and settled behind her ribs. She still had blood on her gloves. "Take them off," Price said. His voice was flat. The overhead light washed his face in a tired yellow that made his wrinkles look sharper than usual. His neatly arranged diplomas lined the wall behind him, all in matching frames, all very straight. His gaze stayed on her hands, not on her eyes. Riley peeled the gloves off one by one. The latex snapped softly. Dark rust-colored smears streaked her fingers where the blood had soaked through. She curled her hands into fists before she could think about whose blood it was. General David Rourke, Delta Force, the man who had looked at her like he was seeing a ghost. Price did not sit down. He planted his hands on the desk and leaned forward. "You had no order to touch that tox cart," he said. "No standing protocol, no attending authorization. You injected a drug into a crashing patient on your own judgment." Riley held his stare. Her heart was pounding, but her voice sounded steady in her own ears. "He was not crashing from his heart," she said. "He was poisoned." His pupils were pinpoints under light. Jaw was locked, hands spastic. His breathing did not match his rhythm at all. It was a neurotoxin profile. Price's lips tightened. "You are an ER nurse," he said. "You are not a toxicologist. You are not a physician. You are not command. You do not get to improvise experimental treatments on decorated generals in my hospital." "It was not experimental," she said quietly. "I have used that antidote before." He blinked just once, where he asked. Sand. A concrete bunker. The taste of metal in the air. Screaming over the radio that no one answered. "Afghanistan," Riley said. "Kandahar province." Price straightened. He picked up a folder from his desk and opened it with deliberate care. "I have 3 incident reports in the last 6 months," he said. "You challenging orders on a trauma intubation. You refusing to administer a medication you said was contraindicated until a second attending confirmed it. And now this." He tapped the folder. "You do not get to play soldier in my emergency department. Turn in your badge." There it was, no warning, no probation, just a hard line. Riley felt something loosen in her chest, then settle again. She reached into the pocket of her navy scrubs, pulled out the plastic ID badge, and set it on the polished wood. "He would have died," she said. "He almost did because of you," Price snapped. "Because you broke chain of command. Get out of my office before I call security." Her hands went still at her sides. The skin on her fingers itched where the blood had dried. She wanted to argue, to pull up his chart, to point at the lab markers that were not cardiac at the way his muscles had seized. Instead, she just said softer than before. "He was not having a heart attack. He was hit with a nerve agent. The same signature compound that killed people I knew." Price looked at her like he had not heard a word. Maybe he had. Maybe he had decided it did not matter. "Out," he said. Riley turned and opened the office door. The hallway outside flooded her with white light and the antiseptic smell of hospital floors. Voices buzzed, phones rang, carts squeaked. She stepped into it without looking back. Heads turned for a second, then dropped. A resident pretended to scroll on a tablet. An older nurse shuffled a stack of papers she did not need to shuffle. Someone murmured, not quietly enough. She always thought she was more than a nurse. Riley walked past them, past the double doors that led back into the ER. The muffled beeping of monitors drifted through the small window. For a heartbeat, she saw Rourke again, pale on the gurney metals gleaming on his blazer, even under fluorescent lights. The memory dragged her inward. The doors had slammed open less than an hour earlier. The paramedics had shoved the stretcher in with the frantic rhythm of men who had already used up their luck on the drive over. "Male mid-60s," one of them shouted. "Collapse in transit, BP tanking, GCS-8 and dropping." Rourke had looked like every combat casualty she had ever seen, and nothing like them at the same time. Skin gone a strange gray under sunspots. Sweat slick on his forehead, his fingers curled tight like his tendons had turned to wire. Dr. Aaron Meyer had been there in an instant, snapping gloves on barking orders. "Possible cardiac arrest," he said. "Get a 12 lead. Prep epi. Someone call cath lab and get tox on standby, but we treat the heart first. Move." The team swarmed the bed. Riley moved with them, a part of the choreographed chaos. She slid a hand under Rourke's forearm. His skin was cold and damp. She pressed 2 fingers to his wrist, felt the stuttering pulse. Something was wrong. She lifted his eyelid with her thumb. The overhead light hit his pupil. It slammed down to a pinpoint, too fast, too hard. Not cardiac. "Doc, step back," Meyer said without looking at her. "I need room for the epi." Riley let go of Rourke's arm. She did not step back. Her gaze ran down to his hands. The nail beds were not just pale. They were faintly tinted almost lavender at the edges. His jaw muscles clenched and unclenched, a tick fighting through stiffness. Jaw lock, spasticity, pinpoint pupils, mismatched respiratory pattern. It lined up in her head with a kind of cold precision that felt like someone else thinking inside her skull. "That's not a heart," she muttered. No one answered, or they did, and she chose not to hear. Her feet carried her sideways to the emergency tox cart. It sat against the wall behind Meyer, locked ignored most days. Her hand went to the keys at her hip, then froze. "You are not command." Riley reached past the latch and yanked the drawer. It resisted, then gave with a jerk. Vials rattled in their foam slots. "Monroe, what do you think you are doing?" Meyer's voice cracked across the room. She skimmed labels. Organophosphate, cyanide, HX7 antagonist. Her fingers closed around the last one. "Step away from that cart," Meyer said. "That is a direct order." Riley did not. She spun back to the bed, snapped the cap off with a practiced twist, found a clean line in Rourke's arm before anyone could block her. "You inject that, and I will have you removed from this building," Meyer said. Riley pushed the antidote in. Her own pulse hammered louder than the monitor. "Come on," she whispered at Rourke's face. "You have done harder tours than this." For one long second, nothing changed. The monitor blared. The line flattened. Someone cursed. Someone else reached for the paddles. Then the rhythm strip jumped. A weak but real complex appeared, then another. Rourke's chest jerked with a deeper breath. The color of his lips shifted barely, but it shifted. Gasps broke around the bed. Meyer stared at the screen, then at Riley. "What did you give him?" Rourke's eyes fluttered open before she could answer. They searched the chaos overhead, confused, then locked onto her. Recognition hit like physical force. "Doc," he rasped, the word scraping out from his dry throat. Riley's body went cold. No one in this hospital called her that. No one here knew that nickname given in a different desert under different fluorescent lights. "Sir, you need to stay still," she said. Rourke's hand twitched, reaching for her wrist. His fingers did not quite make it. "Kandahar outpost," he choked. "Raven Squad. They told us you were gone. They said you all burned." The monitors beeped steadily now, a strange counterpoint to the sudden silence in the room. Meyer glanced at Riley, then at Price, who had appeared in the doorway sometime during the exchange. Riley felt the eyes on her, but the only thing she saw was the image behind her own eyelids, a concrete roof giving way, fire rising, the world tilting sideways. "They lied," Rourke whispered. "You were not supposed to survive that blast, Doc." The word hung between them. Doc, not nurse, not Miss Monroe. Riley opened her mouth, then closed it. Before she could say anything, Price's voice cut through. "Monroe, office, now." The memory snapped. She was back in the hallway, her badge gone, her hands empty. She reached the end of the corridor and pushed through the last set of doors. The main lobby opened up in front of her high-ceiling glass walls, looking out toward the parking lot and the strip of pale blue morning sky. She paused at the revolving door. Her fingers brushed the metal bar. The glass in the frame shivered just a little, like something heavy had started to move somewhere above the building. Riley frowned and looked up. The windows hummed against their seals. The vibration climbed through the structure and into her bones. For a moment, she thought of air conditioners again, of generators kicking in. Then the sound deepened. A low, familiar thrum rolled down through the concrete. It sounded like rotor blades. She stood there, one hand on the door, as the hospital around her kept breathing. The coffee cup on Price's desk was probably trembling again. So was the whole building. The sound grew teeth. It chewed its way down through concrete and glass until no one could pretend it was an air conditioner anymore. Conversations in the lobby faltered. The volunteer at the information desk looked up from her computer, her mouth parting. "Is that a helicopter?" someone asked. Riley let go of the revolving door. The vibration sharpened a low mechanical drum that shook the metal frames of the windows. Dust trembled in a shaft of light near the ceiling. A little boy in a dinosaur t-shirt covered his ears and pressed into his mother's side. Then the overhead speakers crackled. "Security to rooftop access. Repeat, security to rooftop access." The lobby broke into motion. Orderlies leaned around corners trying to see outside. A pair of internal medicine residents jogged toward the stairwell door. The volunteer stood up halfway, then sat back down as if glued to her chair. Riley stayed where she was for a moment, feeling the hum in the bones of the building in her own ribs. General Rourke's voice echoed in her mind. "You were not supposed to survive that blast, Doc." She exhaled, turned away from the front doors, and followed the flow of bodies toward the stairs that led to the roof. The stairwell was suddenly crowded. Staff in scrubs pressed up against lab coats and security uniforms, everyone craning their necks toward the landing above. The air smelled like sweat and disinfectant, and the faint tang of fuel leaking down from somewhere higher. Riley slipped along the wall, moving with the muscle memory of someone used to narrow spaces and bad odds. She climbed past a pair of nurses whispering about a VIP transfer past a janitor clutching his mop like a walking stick. At the top, the roof access door was propped open. Hot coastal air poured in, carrying with it a roar that filled her chest. She stepped out into sunlight. The helicopter sat on the painted H of the hospital helipad rotors, still spinning, sending hard gusts across the roof. The wind peeled at her scrubs and tugged her hair loose from its tie. It tasted like salt and exhaust on her tongue. Uniformed Navy personnel flanked the aircraft. Their eyes swept every face emerging from the stairwell, skimming over doctors and nurses, and security guards searching for something specific. One of them, a woman in a dark flight suit with rank on her collar, lifted a hand. "Hold the line," she shouted at the small crowd. Her voice cut sharply through the rotor noise. "Everyone back against the wall unless you are on the roster." Security guards moved in belatedly, shepherding curious staff away from the pad. A respirator tech muttered something sour and started to argue, but the look from the woman in the flight suit silenced him. Riley recognized that tone. Not just authority, field authority, the kind that had weight even without the uniform. The woman scanned the front row and pointed straight at Riley. "You," she called. "Name." Riley squinted against the wind. "Riley Monroe," she answered. The woman's shoulders eased almost imperceptibly. "Doc Monroe," she called back. The word hit harder than the wind. Riley's fingers curled at her sides. She did not answer, but that hesitation was answer enough. The woman nodded once and strode forward. "Commander Elena Park, United States Navy," she said, stopping just in front of Riley. Her hair was pulled tight, but loose strands whipped around her cheeks. "You treated General David Rourke in the ER this morning." Riley glanced at the helicopter, at the open side door, at the shadow of a stretcher inside. "I was on his case," she said. "I am no longer employed here." "That is a problem for your HR department," Park said. "General Rourke regained consciousness long enough to ask for you by name and give a partial debrief. He identified a nerve agent connected to a classified operation. Right now, that is my only problem." Behind them, Dr. Price pushed through the crowd, tie askew, face flushed. "Commander," he said loudly, "Ms. Monroe has been terminated for gross misconduct. She is not cleared for any further contact with the general or to be involved in any federal investigation." Park did not look at him. Her gaze stayed on Riley. "Is that true?" she asked. "Yes," Riley said. Price folded his arms, emboldened. "You see," he said, "she no longer represents this hospital in any capacity. I expect that to be respected." Park turned her head slowly. "With respect, Dr. Price," she said. Voice cool. "My orders come from higher than your board of directors. The general is awake. He is in possession of information about an active threat involving a nerve agent, and he has identified this nurse as the only medic he knows who has actually treated exposure and survived. She used an unapproved drug without authorization," Price said. "She risked his life." Park's brows lifted. "And did he die?" she asked. Price's mouth flattened. "That is not the point." "It is the only point I care about," Park said. "Step aside." They stared at each other. The rotor noise filled the pause. Price finally moved not much, just enough space for Park to stand fully in front of Riley. "You do not have to come," Park said to her. "I am not your command. But I need you to know that if this agent is what he says it is, we may not have anyone else with real-world exposure. Simulations do not count." The words scraped across old scars. Riley looked past her again into the open cabin. For a heartbeat, she saw a different interior, a cargo plane, red webbing seats, her squad lined up and laughing too loud. Then it was gone, replaced by the gleam of monitor screens and the silver curve of an oxygen tank. "I will come," Riley said. Park nodded once. "Good," she said. "Stay with me." They crossed the pad together, ducking slightly as they neared the rotors, out of habit more than necessity. The wind tugged at their clothes. The smell of fuel thickened. Inside the helicopter, it was somehow both louder and more contained. Headsets hung from hooks above the seats. A medic in navy green braced beside the stretcher, one hand steadying an IV line. General Rourke lay strapped to the gurney chest, rising and falling under a monitor harness. The oxygen mask covered half his face, fogging with each breath. Lines of strain carved deeper into his skin since she had seen him last. His eyes opened as they stepped in. They found her very quickly. He lifted a hand a few inches off the mattress, as if greeting an old friend or checking that she was real. "Doc," he said through the mask. The single syllable came out muffled, but it was clear. Riley moved closer until she could feel the heat coming off his body, the mechanical cool of the oxygen flow in contrast. "I am here, sir," she said. Park leaned in from the other side. "General Commander Park," she said, "you are on the roof at St. Gabriel. You asked for Doc Monroe." Rourke nodded weakly. His gaze did not leave Riley. "Tell her," he rasped. "Tell her what they did." Park glanced at Riley, then back at him. "Tell her what, sir?" she asked. Rourke tried to clear his throat, coughed, then forced the words. "Raven Squad," he said. "Kandahar Outpost. You found the files. You called it in. Someone did not like that." Riley felt her stomach knot. The name sat between them like a live round. We were told it was an enemy strike, she said. Her voice came out rougher than she intended. They said the ammo dump cooked off. Rourke shook his head slow and heavy. Clean up, he whispered. Controlled burn, convenient explosion. The program disappears, so do the witnesses. His hand tightened on the edge of the blanket. They used a prototype agent on that test site, he went on. Organophosphate variant. That is what you saw on that floor today. Same signature, same pinpoints, same paralysis. It is not supposed to exist anymore. It does, Riley said. Rourke let out a short, bitter exhale that fogged the plastic mask. If they hit me with it here, he said, they know I remember. They know you walked out of that fire when you were not supposed to. That makes you a loose end. Park cut in brisk but urgent. General, do you have any indication who sanctioned this? She asked. Any names, any units, any movement in the last weeks? Rourke's eyes fluttered. Effort cost him. All I know, he said, is that the people who own that program do not like gaps in the record. They will close them. The helicopter vibrated with a different rhythm, then a sharp buzz from the radio unit near the cockpit. The pilot reached back and slapped the intercom switch. Commander, he called. We have an update from inside, code blue in ICU, collapse in room 14. Patient is listed as Lieutenant Jonah Hayes, Navy liaison to General Rourke. Park's jaw clenched. Of course he is, she muttered. She met Riley's eyes. That is his comms officer, she said. If he went down with the same symptoms inside this building, then whoever is doing this is not outside. They are here. Riley already knew. Cold sweat, jaw lock, pinpoint pupils, a bag of fluid that looks ordinary until it does not. I need to see him, she said, now. Park hesitated only long enough to look at Rourke. Sir, she asked. Rourke blinked once slow. Take her, he whispered. She has seen this poison before. She is the only one in this place who has. Then he fixed his gaze on Riley again. Do not let my people die like yours did, he said softly. The rotors outside still turned, but the noise seemed farther away. Riley straightened. I will not, she said. Park signaled to the medic to stay with the general, then hopped down onto the helipad. Riley followed her out into the wind again. They crossed the roof together and plunged back into the stairwell. The door slammed behind them, muffling the roar. The hum of the building took over the layered sounds of alarms and overhead announcements and too many footsteps on too little tile. As they descended, a voice echoed through the speakers. Code Blue ICU Room 14. All available critical care staff respond. Park took the steps 2 at a time. ICU is 3 floors down, she said. Video feeds will take a minute to pull. You will have eyes on the patient first. Riley nodded. Her chest felt tight, but her breathing was even. The smell of the hospital wrapped around her, again antiseptic and old coffee and recycled air. The building vibrated in a different way now, not from the rotor blades, but from the movement inside it. They reached the ICU level. The hallway outside the unit was clogged with staff in varying states of focus and fear. Monitors beeped from behind closed doors. Someone had spilled a tray of syringes near the nurse station, and they lay scattered like silver straws on the floor. Park flashed her badge at the charge nurse. Commander Park Navy. We are here for Lieutenant Hayes, she said. This is Monroe. She is with me. The charge nurse hesitated, eyes flicking to Riley, then to Park. He is in 14, she said finally. He went down fast. We cannot figure out why. Riley stepped past her toward the glass doors of the ICU. I might, she said. She pushed into the unit, the air instantly cooler, sharper, carrying the steady hiss of oxygen and the high, insistent chime of machines trying to keep up. Room 14 sat at the far corner of the ICU, a rectangle of glass and shadows. Riley paused outside for a second. The monitors inside sent soft green and blue light across the floor. Lieutenant Jonah Hayes lay on the bed, a tangle of limbs and tubing, his Navy ID tag still clipped to his shirt pocket. She pushed the door open. Cold air met her first. The unit always ran a few degrees lower than the rest of the hospital to keep the machines from overheating. It smelled like plastic and saline and the faint sting of alcohol wipes. Hayes's skin had gone the same washed-out gray as Rourke's. Sweat beaded on his forehead. A line of it tracked down into his hairline. His lips had a bluish tint like someone had pressed them with ink and not finished the job. A nurse stood at the bedside adjusting a drip. Her hands moved quickly, but her eyes kept darting to the heart monitor, to the respiratory rate climbing in the corner of the screen. He just dropped, she said when she saw Riley. He was sitting up 1 minute talking about his wife coming down from Ventura, and then his words started slurring. He tried to stand. His legs would not listen. Riley stepped in beside her. She brushed the inside of Hayes's wrist with her fingers. His skin was clammy. The pulse under it fluttered fast and weak. Jaw, she asked. The nurse frowned. Locked. She said. We had trouble opening it to check his airway. Riley peeled back one of his eyelids. The iris rolled sluggishly. The pupil snapped down into a pinprick when the overhead light hit far too fast for someone in simple distress. Her throat tightened. She looked at his nails. The same faint violet halo had started to bloom under each one, subtle but unmistakable. Same signature, same poison. Behind her, Commander Park stood just inside the room, arms folded. She watched without speaking, her jaw working once as if she had bitten down on a thought. "What is he on?" Riley asked. "Standard post-op fluids," the nurse said. "Electrolytes, nothing special." "Who hung the bag?" Riley asked. The nurse hesitated. "I think it was Rachel from night," she said. "She stayed over to help with the overflow from trauma. She said she would cover Hayes while I went on break." Riley did not move for a second. "Rachel Carter?" she asked. "Yes," the nurse said. "Why?" Riley straightened and looked at the nurse fully. "Rachel has a 3-year-old, she said. She never stays over. She leaves at 7 on the dot to beat traffic and pick him up." The nurse's face went pale. "I saw her badge," she said weakly. "It was Rachel, I swear." "Maybe it was her badge," Riley said. She turned her attention to the IV pole. The clear plastic bag hung placid and perfect fluid, dripping in slow, steady intervals. On the surface, it looked identical to every bag in the unit. Riley crouched beside the stand. The floor felt cool under her knee through the fabric of her scrubs. A single droplet clung to the metal shaft near the bottom. It had slid down from the point where the tubing met the pole. Light from the monitor caught it glinting. It did not bead like water. It spread in a thin oval rainbow, edges flickering. Riley reached out with a gloved fingertip and touched the edge of the droplet. It was slicker than saline, a little viscous. There was a faint chemical bite at the back of her nose when she lifted her hand closer. Her pulse picked up. "It is not just fluids," she said quietly. "We need to switch this line now, push antidote, and get tox to start a panel, but I am not waiting for that lab." She glanced at Park. "And we need to know where whoever did this walked next." Park gave a small nod toward the nurse. "Do what she says," she told her. "We will handle the rest." Riley stripped off the gloves she had contaminated and snapped on a fresh pair. She helped the nurse clamp off the line spike, a new bag, flush the catheter. While they worked, she kept one eye on the monitor. Hayes's heart rate stuttered, then began to drift lower. His breathing, which had been fast and shallow, evened by a fraction. It was enough to keep him in the fight for now. Riley finished, then backed away from the bed. "Watch his pupils," she said. "If they start widening without light change, call me and tox both." The nurse nodded, grateful for something that sounded like a plan. Riley stepped out into the main ICU corridor. Park followed. The noise level rose again outside the quiet bubble of the room. Nurses called to one another over the beeps and alarms. A respiratory therapist hustled past, pushing a ventilator. Riley dropped her gaze to the floor. The droplet by the IV pole had not been alone. Tiny marks dotted the tile just outside the door, irregular and almost invisible, unless the light hit them right. Each one carried the same faint, oily sheen. She walked slowly, following them. The trail curved down the hall, slipping past other rooms, hugging the wall, like someone who did not want to be seen. Park fell in beside her. "What are you seeing?" she asked. "Footprints," Riley said, "without feet." They moved together, eyes on the path written in chemicals instead of dust. The trail led them out of the ICU through a set of staff-only doors into a quieter wing. The noises of the unit faded behind them, replaced by the low mechanical rhythm of building systems. At the far end of the corridor, a sign pointed left toward imaging and right toward pharmacy. The droplets glinted when Riley turned right. Pharmacy sat behind a heavy door with a keypad and a camera bubble in the corner of the ceiling. The door stood half open. That alone made the back of Riley's neck prickle. Inside, the controlled substances room looked like a storm had hit it. A cart lay tipped on its side drawers, half open. Pill bottles rolling lazily back and forth as the hospital vibrated around them. Several glass vials had shattered on the floor. The smell of alcohol and some sharper metallic note tangled in the air. A pharmacist in a white coat stood just outside the wrecked room, pale and shaken. A security guard hovered beside him, one hand near his radio. "I was at the front station," the pharmacist stammered as Park approached. "I heard the alarm for the door, but when I turned, it was already closing. By the time I got here, it looked like this." "Who was inside?" Park asked. "I do not know," he said. "They were gone." Riley stepped carefully on the dry parts of the floor, avoiding the glitter of glass. The cabinet that held rare tox agents hung ajar. In the foam slots inside, several spaces were empty. HX line vials that should have been there were not. On the wall above the door, the small security monitor showed a frozen frame from the camera feed. Security had hit pause. The image was grainy. The color washed out. Even so, the figure in the frame looked solid. Scrubs, surgical cap, mask, latex gloves, a clipboard hooked under one arm as if they belonged there and had a reason to move with such calm. "Rewind it from the last access," Park told the guard. He nodded, thumb already on the buttons. The figure on the screen jerked backward, then forward again as the footage moved to the right spot. The timestamp in the corner showed a timestamp barely 10 minutes old. The person in scrubs walked into view from the lower right, steady and unhurried. They did not try to hide their face from the camera. The mask covered enough to turn them into a generic staff member. Riley moved closer, drawn in. The figure approached the keypad. They did not hesitate before entering the code. Their fingers flew through a sequence only someone with clearance would know. The light flicked green. The door opened. They stepped inside like they had done it 100 times. Inside the small room, they headed straight for the tox cabinet. No scanning labels, no confusion. Their hand went to the exact shelf where the HX line vials lived. They plucked several out, slipped them into a pocket, then swept an arm across another shelf, sending a cascade of other vials to the floor, creating chaos to hide intent. The guard paused the video at the moment the figure turned halfway toward the door. The angle caught the side of their head, the line of their jaw, under the tie of the mask, the set of their shoulders. "Can you zoom in?" Park asked. The guard did what he could. The pixels bloomed larger, but shape stayed. Riley stared. The scrub top hung on a frame she knew. Weight settled on the balls of the feet. The head tilted slightly before moving like the person was listening to more than one thing at a time. The left shoulder sat a little lower, the old habit of someone who had carried too much gear on that side. Her mouth went dry. No one else would have seen it. To everyone else, it was a stranger in hospital green. To her, it was muscle memory made visible. Monroe Park said quietly, "Do you recognize them?" Riley shook her head first. The denial came before thought. She blinked and her vision flashed sand and smoke over the monitor screen, the sharp smell of burning paperwork, the weight of rubble on her chest. The sound of one voice on the radio cut off mid-word. "They died," she said. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "He died. We never found a body, just his tags and his helmet." Park did not say anything. The figure on the screen stepped back out of the room and out of frame. The guard let the tape run another few seconds, then stopped it again. It only showed an empty doorway and the mess left behind. Riley reached out and touched the edge of the monitor with her fingertips. The name surfaced like something breaking through ice. "Mason Holt," she whispered. The syllables tasted like metal. For a second, the noise in the pharmacy dimmed. She could hear only her own breath and the rush in her ears. He had taught her how to move without making noise on gravel, how to slow her breathing without thinking about it, how to keep her hands steady when everything shook. He had walked ahead of her in that bunker in Kandahar, turning his head in that exact way before every doorway. "He is dead," Monroe Park said softly. "Are you certain?" Riley's fingers curled against the plastic casing of the monitor. "He was," she said. A sharp tone from the ceiling speakers sliced through the moment. "All units, security alert," the overhead voice announced. "Unauthorized individual and staff, restricted corridor near East Wing. Suspected route toward pediatrics. Repeat, pediatrics." Every head in the pharmacy snapped up. Park straightened. "Pediatrics is 2 floors up and 1 wing over," she said, already turning. Riley was moving before she finished the sentence. The ghost on the screen had chosen his next step. He was not done. The elevator right up felt longer than it was. Riley watched the floor numbers flick past the red digits, jumping from 3 to 4 as the cab hummed. A loose panel in the corner vibrated with every shift of the cables, a tiny rattle that matched the pulse in her throat. Commander Park stood beside her, one hand on the radio clipped to her vest. The other rested lightly on the sidearm at her hip. Her reflection in the elevator doors looked steadier than Riley felt. "Security has units moving to pediatrics from East Stairs and Main Hall," Park said. "If they catch a glimpse of him, it might flush him." Riley shook her head. "If they spook him near kids," she said, "it might do more than that." The door slid open to the 4th floor. The pediatrics wing did not sound like the rest of the hospital. Even in a crisis, it held a different pitch. Softer voices, cartoon voices from wall-mounted screens, the occasional cry of a child. Now there was something else threaded through it. Fear. Colorful murals of whales and balloons stretched along the walls. A paper chain of construction paper stars drooped over the nurses' station. Behind the counter, 3 pediatric nurses huddled together, eyes wide. One of them pointed as Riley and Park approached. "He went that way," she said. Her voice came out thin. Scrubs mask cap. Looked like he belonged here. "He walked straight toward isolation." "Did he say anything?" Park asked. The nurse shook her head. "No," she said. "He did not even look at us." Riley could picture it. Mason moving like he had all the time in the world, shoulders loose, head taking in every angle. Her gaze slid to the long corridor that led toward the isolation rooms. The overhead lights buzzed. The air tasted faintly of bubblegum flavoring from some child-friendly medication. A memory rose without permission. Kandahar air dry and full of dust. Mason standing in a doorway with his mask half off, grinning at her over a filter. Air is a battlefield, Doc. People forget that. She had not forgotten. Not since the first time she watched it kill someone before a bullet did. Park touched her elbow. We go together, she said. He sees navy, maybe he folds. Riley kept her eyes on the end of the hallway. If he sees uniforms, he runs, she said. If he runs, he finds somewhere worse to crack that vial. Somewhere with more vents and less oversight. And if you go alone, Park asked. Riley drew in a slow breath. The air smelled of hand sanitizer and the sugary tang of a spilled juice box. If he sees me, she said, he stays. He will want to talk. He always did. Park studied her face. Is this about you knowing him? Park asked. Or him knowing you? Yes, Riley said. They held each other's gaze. The sounds of pediatrics carried around them, the rustle of blankets, the beep of small monitors, the muffled cartoon laugh track from a distant room. Finally, Park nodded. I will hold my team at the corner, she said. We move in if we hear glass or screaming. You keep your comms open. Riley tapped the small earpiece tucked into her right ear. She had forgotten it was there until Park mentioned it. It is on, she said. She started down the hallway. As she walked, she glanced into a few open doors. A boy slept with a stuffed lion tucked under his arm. A teenager scrolled slowly on a phone IV pole beside the bed, eyes fixed on her screen as if nothing beyond it could touch her. At the end of the hall, 3 isolation rooms sat in a row. Heavy doors, negative pressure systems, small windows with blinds that could be drawn. The first door was closed, blinds down. The room number glowed chilly blue on the panel. The second door was propped half open, an empty cart parked outside. The third door was ajar by an inch. A soft hum reached her from inside. The sound of an air purifier working harder than it needed to. Riley stopped just short of the threshold. Mason, she said. She did not raise her voice. I know you hear me. There was a pause. The hum continued. Somewhere deeper in the unit, a child laughed, once the sound oddly sharp in the quiet. Then fabric rustled. The door swung silently under her hand when she pushed. The isolation room was dim. The blinds were drawn, turning daylight into a vague gray glow. The air purifier in the corner pulsed with a steady white noise. A small crib stood against the far wall rails, up mattress bare. The room was empty at first glance. Then a shape separated from the curtain near the window. He stepped out with the ease of someone who had waited in dark spaces before. Scrubs masked surgical cap. Under the cap, a few strands of hair had gone gray at the temples. His eyes had not. Gray sharp, taking her in the way he used to assess a new sector of wall or a fresh patch of ground. Doc, Mason Holt said. The mask muffled the edges of his voice, but she heard it fully. He said it like it had been waiting on his tongue for years. Riley's heartbeat ticked up. The rest of the room fell away for a moment. The machines, the crib, the noise of the purifier, all background. She had seen his name etched on a memorial list. She had watched his dog tags melt in her hands in a field hospital tent when they had no body to bury. You are supposed to be dead, she said. The corner of his eyes crinkled. It might have been a smile. It might not. So are you, he answered. The air between them felt thinner. Raven burned, Riley said. They told us there was nothing left. Mason tilted his head that same small angle she had watched on the security feed. Raven did what it was told he said, went where it was pointed, found what it was not meant to find. Somebody had to clean that up. He took a small step closer. The light from the door caught part of his face, the bridge of his nose, the curve of cheekbone. You walked out of the rubble, Doc, he said. You were the mistake they missed. Riley's fingers itched to reach for a weapon she did not have. You were there when that blast went off, she said. You were ahead of me. You called the contact in. You said the lab was clear. Mason's eyes flickered. It was not clear, he said. You saw that later, those tanks, those cages, the rats gasping on the floor, the files that said field test. He shifted his weight casual but ready. They could not afford a squad full of people who had seen all that he said. They needed the explosion. Fires do good work. Ash does not talk. Riley swallowed. The air felt thick in her throat. You survived conveniently, she said. How convenient for them. Not for me, he said. Surviving hurt. Waking up in a room full of men in suits explaining how much easier everything would be if Raven stayed dead. That hurt worse. He reached into his pocket and brought out a small glass vial between thumb and forefinger. Clear liquid clung to the inside like oil refusing to bead. Riley's skin crawled at the sight. You know this one, Mason said. You felt it on your own lungs when the tank cracked. You watched it climb into our people's heads and shut them off one nerve at a time. Her jaw clenched. You are using the same agent inside a civilian hospital, she said. On a general and his comms officer. On my patients. He rolled the vial gently, watching the liquid slosh. They are not civilians to the ones who run this game, he said. They are loose pages in a file that was supposed to burn. Like you. In her ear, Park's voice came through, quiet and precise. Riley status, she said. Do you need backup? Riley did not reply. She kept her eyes on Mason's hand. He noticed the faint shift in her focus. His mouth moved under the mask, not quite a smile. "You brought company," he said. "You always did hate walking into a bad room alone." "I asked them to stay back," Riley said. "They do not know you like I do. They only know what you are carrying." Mason studied her. "You still think this is about what I am carrying," he said. "You have not changed as much as I thought." He took another step, angled, now putting himself between her and the crib. "There is no kid in here," she said. "Not yet," he answered. The implication dropped into the space between them. Riley's heart tripped. Her skin went cold. "You would not," she said. "You watched a whole squad choke on this stuff," he said softly. "You still think the people who ordered that care about 2 kids with RSV and a general with a conscience." He lifted the vial slightly. "You take 1 step too fast," he said. "You grab, you reach it. Slips. The air does the rest." "That is the beauty of it, Doc. Once it is out, no one has to pull a trigger." Riley's mind flicked through the room. Air purifier, vent placement, door angle, her own position. "Talk to me then," she said. "Use your words, not that." Mason's eyes softened for the barest second. "Words did not work," he said. "I wrote reports, I flagged channels, I asked for oversight. You remember what we got. Static on the radio, then fire." He glanced briefly toward the doorway as if measuring how close Park's team might be. "They offered me a deal," he said. "Be part of the solution," they called it. "Help them manage risk. Help them decide which fires to light and which to watch from a distance." He looked back at her. "I chose to live," he said simply. "You chose to crawl out of a hole you were not meant to, and then pretend scrubs would keep you safe." Riley took in a breath. The purifier's whir filled her ears. The air tasted clean. That would not last if he dropped that vial. "You can still put it down," she said. "You can walk out of here. Tell them to their faces what you told me in that bunker when we found the lab." He was quiet for a heartbeat. "What did I say?" he asked. "You said this is not what we signed up for," she answered. "You said we do not kill unarmed targets." Mason's shoulders moved in a small shrug. "Maybe that is why we got killed," he said. Outside, a floorboard creaked. A soft scuff of a boot in the hall. Park's team was shifting. Mason heard it. The focus in his eyes snapped. The softness disappeared. "Time is up," he said. His arm moved quick and sure. The vial left his fingers in a clean arc toward the floor. Riley lunged. Her hand shot out. She caught the glass with the tips of her fingers just enough to twist its path. Instead of shattering at their feet, it hit the wall near the baseboard. The glass cracked with a sharp pop. A thin cloud bloomed, shimmering faintly in the dim light. It crawled outward along the floor, reaching for open air. Riley grabbed the nearest thing with mass. The isolation curtain hung half-drawn beside her. She tore it free from 2 of its hooks and flung it down over the spill. It hit the tile and billowed, then settled, trapping most of the cloud under its thick fabric. Her eye stung. The purifier roared louder as the sensors picked up a change in the air. The door slammed open. Park was there, mask, on 2 armed security officers fanning at her shoulders. They took in the scene, the curtain on the floor, the broken glass. Riley crouched, hand planted on the fabric to keep it from lifting. "What happened?" Park demanded. Riley sucked in a measured breath through her teeth. "Minor release," she said. "Contained. Get hazmat up here, and do not let anyone touch that curtain without full gear." She looked up. Mason Holt was already gone. The emergency exit at the back of the room, the one that led to the service stairwell, yawned open. A faint draft slid in from the gap, cool against her face. The air in the room felt thinner again. "He is heading down," Riley said. Park followed her gaze. Down where she asked. Riley pictured the layout of the hospital, the guts of the building, the places where air moved most. The lower levels, she said, where the building breathes the hardest. The stairwell to the lower levels smelled different. Upstairs it was disinfectant and coffee and the faint sweetness of pediatric syrups. Here the air thickened with dust and machine heat as if the building exhaled under its own weight. Riley took the steps down 2 at a time, one hand on the railing. The metal vibrated under her palm. The deeper they went, the louder the hum became, a layered grind of fans and compressors working somewhere out of sight. Park followed close behind her, radio crackling softly at her shoulder. "Security is closing off ground exits," Park said between breaths. "If he wants out, he will have to get past my people." Riley shook her head without slowing. "He is not heading out," she said. "He is heading in." "In where?" Park asked. "The lungs," Riley said. "The intake." They passed the level marked B1, then B2. The fluorescent lights here were older. One flickered overhead, casting a faint strobe down the concrete shaft. By the time they hit the bottom landing, the sound had turned into a full-body sensation. The floor thrummed. The air felt colder, pulled and pushed by forces behind the walls. A sign beside the door read, "Mechanical access authorized personnel only." Park swiped a temporary access card one of the security officers had handed her upstairs. The lock clicked. She pushed the door open. The corridor beyond was long and low. Exposed pipes ran along the ceiling wrapped in insulation. Thick metal ducts branched overhead, some as wide as a truck tire. Every few yards a grated vent pulsed with the breath of the building. The lights were spaced farther apart. Pockets of shadow pooled between them. Riley stepped in. The concrete under her shoes felt slightly damp, as if condensation leaked from the veins of the hospital. The temperature dropped another notch. Her breath came out in a faint cloud. Park kept her voice low. "Ventilation control is at the far end," she said. "Central intake and distribution for the whole structure." Riley already knew. She could feel the pull of it, the way air rushed more fiercely the farther they went. They rounded a bend. The hum grew louder. At the end of the corridor, a heavy steel door sat recessed into the wall. Black letters on a plaque beside it announced ventilation control. Below that, a smaller warning block read restricted access, high pressure systems, hazardous conditions. A keypad blinked green beside the handle, waiting for a code. In front of the door, Mason Holt stood with his back partially turned. He had traded the small vial for something else. A metal canister rested on the floor between his boots, about the size of a fire extinguisher, with a simple valve assembly on top. His gloved right hand hovered above the keypad. His left hand brushed the curve of the canister almost absent-mindedly. He did not jump when Riley and Park rounded the corner. He simply turned his head enough to see them, then faced the door again. "You made good time," he said. His voice bounced off the concrete. Without the softening of a sick room, it sounded sharper. Park's hand went to her sidearm. "Do not touch that keypad," she said. "Step away from the door." Mason glanced over at her eyes, taking in the weapon, the vest, the set of her shoulders. "You brought your own security system," he said. "It is not here for decoration," Park answered. "Let go of the canister and put your hands where I can see them." Mason's fingers tightened on the valve. "You shoot me here," he said. "I drop this. You wing me. I drop this. Either way, your hospital gets very quiet very fast." Riley moved slightly ahead of Park, but not too far. She kept her hands visible. "That thing is not a bluff," she said. "You open that valve into the intake and everyone upstairs is on borrowed minutes." Mason looked at her fully this time. "Everyone upstairs already is," he said. "They just do not know who is counting." The air from the vents brushed her face, cool and insistent. The building felt like a giant sleeping animal chest, rising and falling. "You know how this system works," Mason said. "Doc, you saw the schematics in the outpost when we pulled the files. One intake feeds it all, one point of entry everywhere at once." Riley remembered. Blueprints spread on a table, lines and arrows, Mason tracing the path of airflow with a pen. "Target the lungs, you do not have to chase the limbs," he had said then. She swallowed. "You are talking about kids in recovery, post-ops chemo patients on 12, she said now. "They are not the ones who pulled that trigger in Kandahar." He shrugged one shoulder. "To the people who wrote our deaths into a training manual, they are all just numbers," he said. "Bed counts, collateral, a cluster of symptoms that can be blamed on a bad batch or an HVAC failure." Park took a step to the side, angling for a different line. Mason shifted just enough to keep both women in his field of view. "This is not about them," Park said. "This is about you and whatever you think you are settling with whoever ran that program. You start a mass casualty, here you do not get a list of names higher up. You get a black bag and a story about a tragic accident." Mason studied her for a beat. "You are not wrong," he said, "but accidents can be very instructive, especially when they follow the same pattern as a classified test that supposedly never happened. It draws eyes to old Ash." He nudged the canister with the toe of his boot. It rocked gently. "They buried Project Halcyon under Raven's bodies," he said. "Burned the bunker, scrubbed the drives, stacked our tags in a box. If a hospital full of people dies breathing the same compound, someone will have to ask why the shadows smell familiar." Park's jaw clenched. "You would kill an entire building just to force an investigation," she said. Mason's eyes flicked back to Riley. "I did not bring the compound into this world," he said. "I just refuse to pretend it is gone." Riley stepped closer, ignoring the way Park's arm twitched to stop her. "How did you survive?" she asked. The question slipped out. She had wanted to know since she saw his walk on the grainy security feed. Mason's gaze went distant for a moment, as if replaying footage only he could see. "Wrong side of a wall," he said. "Right side of a pressure wave. I woke up under concrete with half my squad on top of me and a tank hissing in the corner." He drew a careful breath. "I remember your voice on the radio," he said. "Remember the way it cut out. Thought you were gone." Then there was nothing but static and heat for a long time. "What happened after?" Riley asked. Mason's eyes sharpened again. "Men in masks," he said. "Not like mine. Full suits. They scraped me off that floor and took me somewhere that smelled like bleach and metal. No insignia on the walls, no names on their coats, just charts about exposure levels and survivability curves." He tapped the canister lightly. "I was an outlier," he said. "I lived long enough to be useful, to answer questions, to see the data on how effective that blast had been at wiping Raven off the board. Riley felt her hands ball slowly into fists. "They told you we were dead," she said. "They showed me the list," he replied. "Rourke. You. The rest. Killed in action. Explosion at a forward operating site. Official enough to calm whoever needed calming. Not official enough to exist in the archive." Park shifted her stance. "That is a nightmare," she said. "It does not justify this." Mason gave a small humorless laugh. "Justify," he said. "That is an interesting word to use watching the fire from outside." Riley could see the edge he was standing on. It was not the simple slope of villainy her training had prepared her for. It was a narrow strip between betrayal and something else twisted around it. "You could have disappeared," she said. "Gone off-grid, lived under another name. You did not have to pick up their weapon. They were going to hand it to someone," he said. "At least in my hands, I know exactly where it is pointed." He glanced at the door. "And right now it is pointed at the only place that will make them feel something when they read the after-action report," he said. "General, liaison, whisper of an old program in the lab notes, witnesses like you." Riley took another step. The hum of the ducks pressed against her skin. "Then take me," she said. The words surprised Park. Riley felt the commander's eyes on her. Mason's head tilted. "Say that again," he said. Riley kept her gaze steady. "You want to erase the mistake in their ledger," she said. "You want to cut the last loose thread from Kandahar. Fine. Take me. Kill me. Make sure my file never needs to be reopened." She gestured upward toward the unseen floors filled with beds and charts and beeping machines. "But you do not touch them," she said. "You do not turn this place into another test site for something they built in the dark." Mason watched her in silence. "You think that buys them anything?" he said at last. "It buys them time," she said. "It buys you a chance to say you did not murder 100 people who had no idea what Raven was. They already murdered you," he said quietly. "On paper. In every system that matters. You are fighting to save people in a world that thinks you are a ghost." "I know I'm not," she said. "That is enough." The quiet that followed was thin and taut. Park's breath sounded loud in the background, harsh through her nose. The vents above them pushed air through indifferent, relentless. For the first time since they had walked in, Mason's hand on the valve trembled. "Family does not survive in our line of work," he said. Raven was not family because of the work, Riley said. It was family because we pulled each other out of the fire, not shoved each other deeper. His eyes flickered. The memory landed. Nights in a desert laughing over rations, hands grabbing straps, dragging bodies clear of blast radius. "You think they will let you live if I walk away from this," he said. "No," she said. "I think they will come harder, but they will have to do it without using your hands." A sound crackled in Riley's ear, Park's voice tense. "Monroe," she said softly into the comm, "you are too close." Riley flicked her fingers against her thigh in the smallest signal she could manage. "Not yet." Mason exhaled long and slow. "You always did like bad odds," he said. "I like having a choice," she said. "This is yours." For a heartbeat, the only movement in the corridor came from the thin swirl of air currents along the floor and the slow blink of the keypad light. Mason looked down at the canister, then back up at her. His fingers loosened on the valve, then tightened again. The building kept breathing. Mason moved first. His hand snapped down not on the valve, but on the canister handle. He yanked it up from the floor and took 2 quick steps toward the door. Riley lunged. Her shoulder hit his chest. The impact slammed them both into the steel. The blow knocked the keypad with a hollow ring and shook dust from the frame. The canister slipped in his grip. Park shouted something behind them. Her voice blurred with the drum of the machines. Mason hooked his arm around Riley's neck and twisted, trying to spin her off. The canister swung, wide metal body banging against the wall. The valve guard clipped Riley's shoulder. Pain shot down her arm, hot and sharp. She grabbed for his wrist with her good hand. Muscle memory answered for her. She felt bone tendon the familiar line of his forearm under her fingers. He had taught her once how to break a grip like this. She reversed it. He hissed through his teeth as she twisted. The canister tipped. Its base scraped the floor, leaving a bright scuff mark. He rammed his knee toward her ribs. She turned, taking the blow along her hip instead. It hurt, but not the way a broken rib did. She could still breathe. "Back off, Doc," he said beside her ear. "You are not fast enough to win this one." "You taught me how to be," she grunted. She dropped her weight, suddenly dragging on his arm. The move pulled him off balance. His boots slipped on a damp patch of concrete. They went down together. The canister hit first. It bounced once, rolled, and came to rest near the wall. The valve assembly rattled but did not crack. Riley rolled away and came up on one knee between Mason and the canister. He was already pushing to his feet. His eyes were flat now, the calculation gone. This was not about speeches anymore. His hand flashed to his sleeve. A small blade slid into his palm, narrow and bright. He had taped it there the way he used to on patrol. Park's gun came up. "Drop it," she barked. Mason did not. He charged instead. Riley met him halfway. She stepped inside the arc of his arm, not away from it. The blade sliced the air where she had been a moment before. She caught his wrist. Her fingers closed around the tendons hard enough to bruise. The world narrowed to that one point of contact. "Same drill," he said grimly. "You remember it." "I remember all of it," she said. She pivoted, driving her elbow up under his, locking his arm around hers. Her hips turned, pressure stacked through shoulder, elbow, wrist. There was a dull crack. Mason cried out. The knife skittered across the floor. It spun once and slid under a pipe. His arm went slack in her grip. For a fraction of a second, they were close enough for her to see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. They had not been there in Kandahar. Time had carved them. He swung with his other hand an awkward hook. It caught the side of her jaw. Stars flared across her vision. She stumbled, hit the wall, tasted copper. The canister sat 3 feet away. Riley shook her head to clear it and dove for the metal cylinder. Her palm slid on the cold surface as she grabbed it. The valve guard was still intact. The indicator dial sat snug in the safe position. She flipped the canister onto its side and braced it between her legs. Mason came at her again. Park fired a warning shot into the concrete near his boot. Chips flew. The noise cracked in the tight space. "Next one is not a warning," she snapped. He stopped breathing hard. Riley hooked her fingers around the valve housing and twisted with everything left in her arm. Metal squealed. The assembly resisted, then tore free with a screech. The interior hissed a short, ugly sound like a snake that had been cut in half. A faint mist seeped from the exposed regulator port, then died as the pressure equalized. Without the valve body, there was no way to push the contents into the system. Riley held the broken piece in her hand. Her knuckles were white. The canister lay silent at her feet. Mason stared at it. "You think that did it?" he said. His voice had lost its sharpness. "You think you just saved them?" Riley dropped the valve housing onto the floor. It rolled to a stop. "I think you cannot poison them through the vents now," she said. "You would have to walk bed to bed." He looked at her for a long moment. Rage burned in his eyes, then cooled into something hollow. "You just signed your own death sentence," he said. "Maybe," she said. "Not yours." He took a breath that sounded like it hurt. "For Raven," he said quietly. "Raven tried to save people," she said. "That is the part I am keeping." Park moved in. She closed the distance with practiced economy guns still trained on Mason. "On your knees," she ordered. He did not fight her. The fight had already drained out. He sank down slowly, his broken wrist hanging at an odd angle, his good hand raised. Security officers appeared at the far end of the corridor, drawn by the gunshot and the radio. They swarmed around Mason. One cuffed his good wrist, then carefully pinned the other to his belt to keep it from flopping. As they hauled him up, he glanced back once toward Riley. "You know they are not done," he said. "You know this was never just about me." Riley met his gaze. "I know," she said. They took him away, footsteps echoing into the concrete distance. Park holstered her weapon. The tendons in her neck stood out for a few seconds before she let herself exhale. "Hazmat is on the way down for that thing," she said, nodding at the canister. "They will want to catalog it, bag it, lock it in a vault no one talks about." Riley's legs felt unsteady. The adrenaline that had held her muscles tight started to bleed out. She leaned against the wall for a second, feeling the cold seep through her scrubs. The ventilation hum continued overhead, unchanged. The building still breathed, but the air tasted cleaner somehow. "Any sign of leakage?" Park asked. Riley shook her head. "Not enough to trip the sensors hard," she said. "Not enough to kill anyone who is not standing right on top of it. They will need masts to move it, but the floors above are safe." Park pressed a hand to her radio. "Control, this is Commander Park. Ventilation threat neutralized," she said. "Repeat, neutralized. Lockdown can be stepped down to controlled access. Hazmat to mechanical level 3. Treat canister as live until confirmed otherwise." A crackle of acknowledgement came back. Riley pushed off the wall. "I need to check on Hayes," she said, "and the general." Park gave a short nod. "We will get you there," she said. The elevator up from the basement felt hotter than it should. Her own reflection in the brushed metal doors surprised her. Sweat darkened the collar of her scrubs. There was a smear of something on her cheek that might have been dust, might have been blood. The ICU was quieter when they returned. The panic had dialed down to a brittle focus. In room 14, Lieutenant Hayes lay under a thin blanket. The lines on the monitor above his bed traced a more regular pattern. His chest rose and fell without a struggle. The nurse who had been there before looked up when Riley stepped in. "Pupils are better," she said, relief leaking into her voice. "He almost coded once, but he never quite fell over the edge. Whatever you did to that line bought him time." Riley studied him. The violet halo under his nails had faded to a faint shadow. His jaw muscles rested loose. His hands lay open, fingers relaxed. "Keep watching him," Riley said. He is not out of it yet, but he is winning. The nurse nodded. Riley stepped back out. General Rourke's room sat near the center of the ICU. 2 Navy personnel stood outside, one on each side of the door, back straight, eyes alert. They stepped aside when Park and Riley approached. Inside, the room felt warmer. The blinds were half raised, letting a strip of daylight in. Rourke's color had improved, though his face still looked carved from stone. He turned his head as the door closed. "Report, Doc," he said. The words settled on her like a familiar weight. "Agent contained," Riley said. "Delivery system disabled in the lower level. The canister will not reach your people. Lieutenant Hayes is stable. You are holding." Rourke's eyes closed briefly. "You stopped him," he said. Riley hesitated. "I stopped myself from becoming him," she replied. He studied her face as if he could read more there. "Raven would be proud," he said. Her throat tightened. She looked at the monitor for a moment to steady herself. The numbers glowed a steady green. Park cleared her throat softly. "General," she said, "Holt is in custody. He will be moved under military guard once the hospital signs off on his immediate medical needs." Rourke's jaw worked. "He will talk," he said. "One way or another, there are people who will want to hear how Halcyon walked out of its grave." Park glanced at Riley. "That brings us to the other part," she said. "Pentagon just lit up my secure line." They reopened a file that used to be stamped classified and deceased. Riley knew which one without hearing it. "Raven," she said. Park nodded. "Your name is on it," she said. "Twice. Once on the list of the dead. Once scratched into the margin by someone who did not quite believe it. They want a debrief from the only medic who has treated this agent in the field and lived." Riley looked at her hands. They were steady now. The phantom vibration from the helicopters had faded, but a different energy hummed under her skin. "You want me to leave the hospital in the middle of this," she said. "The hospital is not in the middle of anything anymore," Park said. "You saw to that. From here, this goes upstairs. Politics, programs, boards with initials. You can stay and patch people up, while someone who has never smelled this stuff reads a summary, or you can come tell them what it feels like when a building starts breathing wrong." Rourke watched her with an intensity that felt almost physical. "You were never just a nurse, Doc," he said quietly. Riley thought of Price's office, the trembling coffee cup, the badge on the desk. She thought of the kids in pediatrics, of the nurse pressing a hand to her own chest when the overhead alarm had sounded, of Hayes's fingers unclenching. Both lives were real, both had weight. "If I go," she said, "they do not get to pretend this was a one-time glitch. They hear Raven's side." Park's mouth quirked. "That is the idea," she said. Riley nodded once. "Then I will come," she said. Park touched her radio again. "Understood," she said into it. "Prep transport, rooftop in 10. Riley spent the next few minutes walking through the corridor she had sprinted through earlier. The chaos had settled into tired order. Nurses moved with the careful efficiency that followed a crisis. Doctors spoke in low voices at stations piled with charts. At the nurses' station outside the ER, a younger nurse stared at Riley as she passed. "You were with him, right?" the nurse asked. "The general, and the other one." "They said you stopped something in the basement." Riley paused. "I was doing my job," she said. The nurse swallowed, nodded, and stepped back. It was not the whole truth, but it was the only one that fit in that moment. Dr. Price waited near the main elevators. His tie was straight again. His expression was not. He opened his mouth. "Monroe," he began. She did not stop walking. "Doctor," she said, giving him a small nod as she went by. Whatever words he had lined up dissolved. He watched her until she disappeared into the stairwell. The climb to the roof felt different this time. The hum under her feet belonged to the building, not to a hidden poison. Outside, the daylight had shifted, slanting and warmer and softer. The helicopter waited on the pad rotors, idling. The wind they stirred was strong enough to tug at her clothes, but it no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a pull. Park stood near the open-door headset around her neck. "Monroe," she called over the noise. "Last chance to decide you have had enough for one career." Riley stepped onto the painted H. The vibration climbed through her legs again, up her spine, into the space behind her ribs. It felt almost familiar now. "I had enough a long time ago," she said, "but I am still here." She climbed into the cabin. As the helicopter lifted away from St. Gabriel, the hospital shrank below them into a cluster of white walls and shining windows. From above, it looked like a single chest rising and falling. The building kept breathing, so did she. Someone in a room beneath that roof would still be calling her Nurse Monroe. Someone else far away already had Doc Monroe highlighted in a file. For the first time in years, the name felt like it belonged to the same person. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.